We are starting from the very beginning. We're going to start with the idea. How do you get good ideas? What do you do once you have an idea? And how do you turn that into something bigger, like a story? Okay, so first of all, where do you get your ideas from? What are like some places you get your ideas? From your head. Great. That is important. Yeah. Other stories? Yes.
Things I see in my daily life.
Oh yeah, real life, your daily experiences. Right.
Different books, movies from like a genre that you want to do.
Yes, you have like a specific genre that you like, books, movies, TV shows, anything of that kind of same thing is very inspiring, sparks ideas. Any other thoughts?
No.
Okay, so yeah, inspiration from other people's ideas, books, music, art, movies, TV. It's not stealing, unless of course you're plagiarizing, then that's different. But somebody else's ideas can definitely inspire your own ideas. Any life experiences that you have, real life relationships, memories that you've made, they are all good inspiration for your own ideas. Any hobbies that you have, you might want to write about how much you love doing something that you love. And then games, especially like role-playing games. If any of you guys played Dungeons and Dragons, that's a great source of inspiration. So ideas come from anywhere and everywhere. There's no bad place to get ideas. Okay. Okay, so here are some examples of where my personal ideas have come from. So the book that I got published, The Immortal Game, it was from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because we were all obsessed with Percy Jackson and the Olympians. It was only like the first 2 books that had come out by then. Okay, and then these are all my work in progress ideas. I came up with the magic system first for this book. I was like, ooh, it'd be great if people could do this kind of magic. This one, a scripture from the Bible. It's not even about anything religious, but this like one verse, I was like, oh, that would make such a cool story idea. For this one, I wanted to write a book with multiple genres. So I started coming up with ideas of how I could make that happen. And then this one was really hard, actually. So I like had reached a point where I was like, I'm done writing all of these projects that I had, and I had like 3 months where I had 0 ideas, and I couldn't think of anything, and it was really bugging me. And I was actually doing a cross-country road trip with my husband, and I was like just staring out the window trying to think of ideas, and I was like, well, pirates, I like pirates. Pirates are cool, and I like writing about magic, so pirates with magic, sure. And then I started writing about pirates with magic, and it was great. Yeah, so sometimes you kind of have to force the ideas out of yourself, and sometimes they just kind of come wherever they come from. Okay, so an important thing to do is to cultivate your imagination. Okay, so you need to practice doing this, especially if you're like, this is something that you want to pursue. This is like your brain, your imagination is a muscle that you need to exercise. So you can't let your imagination go away. You don't let the grown-ups put you down. Give yourself time to daydream. Let your mind wander. This is important for the creative process. So don't let people tell you, like, get your head out of the clouds. That's what my parents did my whole life. But I didn't listen to them. Okay, because it's literally how you're going to do your job. All right, it's like important for you to practice letting your mind wander and, you know, just sit and listen to music, see where your imagination takes you, you know, do it. Don't let anybody tell you not to. Be a daydreamer. It's important. Okay, so what are some ideas that you guys have that you can do to practice like using your imagination and like exercising that imagination muscle? What are some ideas that you can, like, how can you be like using your imagination a lot?
I think the other just did it. Yeah.
Layla just zoning out, yeah, letting your mind wander, daydreaming. Totally.
My favorite certified is right here.
Totally. Yeah. Doing what you like doing, cultivating your hobbies and your interests. That is so inspiring.
Do this for not just writing, like this part that I do. I love
Pinterest mood boards. Yes.
I was thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna give that character who say,
No.
either
Yes.
this is something this character would enjoy, or ooh, Popeye.
That is not silly at all. That's how I spent my high school years, listening to music and like coming up with like scenes that go along to the music or like to the lyrics, some ideas that you have. Reading books, watching movies, watching TV, those are all inspiring you, cultivating your imagination because you're implanting yourself into this different world and you're going along with the story and it's giving you ideas. Yeah.
Reading like when you want to write, like I always feel like I want to write something after I finish a book. Like,
Yes. Okay. That happens to me all the time. After you like finish a good book or like a lot of times after I've watched a good movie, I'm like, oh, I want to like keep this high and I want to write my book and get creative and just yes. Cool.
Sometimes I just want to keep writing like what I want.
Yeah.
I
Ooh.
don't mind to stop.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. Fan fiction. Fan fiction is real. It's a great place to practice your writing. So what kind of ideas can you start your story off as? So like every single time you come up with an idea, it's going to be about a different thing. So how, like, what are the types of things? I can't remember if this is yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can start off with a character idea. Like, ooh, it'd be fun to write a character who was like this. You could start off with like a magic system idea. Like, I want to write about people who can waterbend. I don't know, lots of people have already done that, but still, you can make it unique. A relationship idea, if you want a book kind of based on maybe a relationship, there are tons of like relationship tropes, like the cinnamon roll and the angry dude. You can come up with an idea for like a setting, like I want to write a book about the West, the Wild West, or I want to write a book about the moon or the desert. It can start an idea as like some dialogue, like you're like, oh, it'd be funny if this person said this to somebody, and you like start building a character based off of that. It can start off as like a vibe, like I want to write a book that has like evil genius vibes or like murder mystery vibes or like horror comedy vibes. I don't know. Like what are you feeling? So anything, your idea can be anything and it can turn into something amazing. No idea is new. Especially nowadays, tons of books, tons of movies, tons of TV shows, everything has been done before. But that should not discourage you because then you can always put a twist on anything. Okay, there's like an infinite number of like combinations of things that you can make. Okay, so if everything has been done before, how is your story going to stand out? How are you going to write something new that people are going to want to read? So, for example, my Pirates book. Pirates have been done before. Magic has been done before. Pirates with magic have been done before. None of that is new. So I am going to make my magic system more unique, something that nobody has done before. I'm going to make my characters special. I'm going to have a different set of characters that interact differently if that's been done before. My relationships are going to be new and interesting. I'm not going to have any stereotypical standard stuff in there. I'm going to like make my setting different and unique. So you can have like basic concepts and ideas that have been done before, but it's what you do with them that makes your story unique. So your winning idea is all about the details. But before we get into the details, how do you know that you have an idea that is something people will want to read? How do you know if you have an idea that will sell? Because this is the business of writing. You want to sell your book. We're not just writing for fun anymore. Just kidding, you should always write for fun, but we're getting serious. Okay, so write what you love, for sure, but what if what you're writing is maybe not going to sell? So it's definitely important to write what you're passionate about. But for now, we're going to kind of set that aside and be like, we're going to focus on what's going to sell. How do I know if I have something that people are going to want to buy? Okay, so this is kind of like, these are going to be heavy, a little bit heavy content slides. So you want to look at what's popular now, what's just stopped being popular, what's been overdone at this point. And if it's a long enough time, maybe you can like revisit those old things. So for example, when the Hunger Games came out, it was like a huge sensation and everybody was only selling like dystopian books. You had Divergent, you had like all of these books that were like in this dystopian, like broken apocalyptic future, just because the Hunger Games became so popular and everybody was riding the coattails of the Hunger Games. And there was this huge wave of like all of these dystopian books. When Twilight came out, there were tons of vampire and werewolf books. Like there was like this whole just like wave of like supernatural creature books that came out in relationships with normal human beings. Like that was like this whole thing. And at this point, it might be like, okay, that's been overdone. Let's not go there. Okay. Once that wave has passed, people are like, I don't want to buy that book anymore. I've already read 100 of those. I want something new. So you also have to keep in mind that even if you got a writing contract today, it's going to take up to 2 years for your book to hit the shelves. A lot can happen in 2 years. All right. So what's super popular right now might not be as popular in 2 years. So it's kind of really hard to predict these trends of what's going to be popular and what's not going to be popular. And this is why like an agent can be really helpful, because it's their job to know what's selling, what's not, what's been done, what's coming up, what's new and exciting. So yeah, it's kind of like a lot. So a good thing to help with that I haven't written on here is if you're reading a lot, if you're like up to date on like TV shows, so you're like aware of what's trending right now and what's already been done. It kind of helps you stay in the know of like ideas that are popular in the business right now. Okay, so my best advice for choosing what ideas to pursue is to just write what you're passionate about. Now I told you we were going to ignore that, but here's the idea. So what you can do is just like write what you love, write what you're excited about, because your book's going to be the best if you're doing that. And if you need to, set that aside. If you're like, okay, I'm writing about pirates, but everybody and their dog just finished writing about pirates, nobody's going to want to read about pirates anymore. So I'm going to finish my pirate book because I'm really into it right now. And then I'm going to set it aside for later. And maybe in a couple of years, people will start getting excited about pirates again. And that's when I'll publish my book. So my advice is to just kind of like write a bunch of stuff, but be strategic about what you're publishing when. You might need to set something aside for a while, or you're maybe like, oh, this is a really hot topic right now. I'm going to get this one done and then publish it, work on publishing it right now. So yeah. So kind of write what you like, but keep an eye on what's popular, what's overdone, what might be not quite done. Because there's like, if you're doing something where you're like, this hasn't really been done in a while, this hasn't been overdone. So if I come out with something like this, it's going to be new and exciting for people, and it might start a trend. So those are always good. For the most part, it's not about the first sole little seed of an idea. It's what that idea becomes. So I'm going to start off with an example from one of my flash fiction pieces. I brought all of my these are the books that I got my stuff published in, my little short stories. So I brought all of those, and I'm using one of these as an example. So like 7 years ago, I was at a movie night with my friends. We were watching Zombieland, and one of them came up with like this really funny quip, this idea. She made a comment about like, oh my gosh, it would be so funny if zombies worked like day jobs. And we started like coming up with these like funny ideas of like, well, what kind of day jobs could a zombie do? And I was like, this is such a great idea, I'm gonna write it down. Okay, so that turned into my flash fiction called Postmortem. If any of you guys don't know what flash fiction is, it's just like a story that's less than 200 words. It's like a real short little story. I wanted to write about a zombie working a job. Okay, that idea is great. but it's not going to go anywhere or do anything unless I start adding to it, adding details, cultivating it. I had to flash it out. I had to embellish it so that I could write a whole short story just based on that one idea. So I had to come up with a plot, a theme, a style. I had to make characters, plan a setting, everything to just turn this silly idea into a story. So this is what I came up with. I decided that a great job for a zombie would be working in a morgue. Some characters, I named my zombie Jim, and I put some medical students in there. The action sequence is there's a nervous student performing her first postmortem, which is where the title came from. The theme is that like everything's not as it appears. And the style is a horror/comedy. Those two go surprisingly well together. Okay, so this is my whole story. I'm not like a showman, so please forgive me for not being the most awesome at reading out loud, but I'm going to read it out loud. Some of it's a little cough. Okay, so the med student's hands shook as she drew the scalpel closer to the skin. He's dead, she told herself. He can't feel anything. She put her other hand on the man's chest to steady herself and orient the blade. It was cold and still, just as a lifeless body should be. With a smooth breath, she pressed down until the end of the scalpel disappeared. A jarring scream split the air. The man, beneath her knife, jerked up, thrashing and wailing like nothing she'd ever heard. She cried as the scalpel hit the floor, and the thing she'd just cut into started laughing. Dang it, Jim, her teacher yelled, stepping through the small crowd of students. This is why you got fired from your last job. Jim shrugged, his chalky olive skin pulled tight over the bones, a classic sign of zombieism. I'm being cut up with knives all day, he argued. I gotta make it fun somehow. The teacher eyed the zombie. 3 strikes and you're gone. Jim, chuckling, settled back on the gurney, and a new student stepped up. Maybe he could convince them to put a TV on the ceiling. So I had this just like idea of what kind of job could a zombie do in the modern world, turned it into a little funny, starts off as kind of like the scary idea and turns into like this funny thing. So yay. Okay, so every idea that you have, turning it into something else is going to follow the same kind of progression. So what are some of the most common things that need to be done to make an idea come to life? Okay, so first off, you have this initial idea. You're like, ooh, this would be cool. And you kind of let it sit in your imagination. You kind of think about where it might go. You maybe daydream about it a little bit. You start to just kind of like solidify this idea more in your brain. Then you need to start adding more ideas to make it even bigger. So you started off with like, oh, this character would be cool. You kind of start thinking about what makes this character cool, building on them. And then maybe like, oh, they're going to have a relationship with this person, or they're going to be able to use this kind of magic, or they're going to be this kind of person in this society. I don't know. You start kind of adding up ideas. So for example, I'm going to have pirates, and I'm going to make them use magic, and I'm going to set it in the 1700s, and my magic is going to be elemental magic, and there's going to be a romance, and you kind of just keep going. And then you hopefully kind of stop. You've got this idea, you started building it, and you're going to review it a little bit, and you're going to think, okay, is this something that I actually am interested in? Do I actually want to write this? Do these ideas work nicely together? Do I need to tweak anything to make them kind of mesh? So like before you start, well, not everybody does this, but before you start really getting into writing your story, you got to make sure that your ideas are starting to like work and click together. Okay, and then you fine tune the details. So this is kind of like my little checklist for what are the main things that every story needs that you should start your idea figuring out. So every book needs a main character. So even if your idea starts with like, I love this magic system, you need to figure out who the main character is, who's the story about. You need to come up with an antagonist, a bad guy, or some kind of conflict. You don't always need a bad guy in your story, but there needs to be something going on, right? So what is the bad thing happening in the story? You need to come up with a setting. Where is the story going to take place? And then start thinking about like rules or laws So for example, if you have a magic system, what are the rules? Or if like this is taking place in a government, what are the rules to this society? What are the rules of this book? What are people constrained to? Yeah, so all of this, before you kind of start thinking about your plot and getting it into, you need to start laying down the foundation of your world and your main idea that everything is going to fit into. So, for the rest of the time, I want you to decide what idea you are going to do your project on this term. So, if you have no ideas, this is a brainstorming time. You can brainstorm with your friends, you can brainstorm with yourself, you can just kind of write whatever. If you already have an idea, start fleshing it out a little bit, brainstorming what it can become. We're gonna follow up on this next class period as well and start talking a little bit more about like genre and audience and age groups and all of this stuff to like really build a foundation for starting to outline our books.